In this video, I will be playing a game with the Pegasus system opening, which starts with pawn to d4, and then on the next move we play knight to d2. And we are playing against an almost 2000 rated opponent here on Leeches. And the main idea behind this opening is to play a very quick pawn to e4 if the opponent allows us to do it. And I think e6 there was a terrible move by black, instantly allowing us to push the pawn. So I'm going to push it twice and also attack the knight. And the funny thing is, this is completely terrible for my opponent, but I have never played against anyone that messed up the opening this bad before. So I have to figure out by myself now what we need to do. Because this, of course, is not good for black. The funny thing is, I think this is actually now turning into a French defense type position. Yeah, it's basically just a French defense. Which means we have this advanced center on the dark squares. My opponent is trying to fight against that center, and we just have to try to keep it. But the big advantage is that we did win some time in the opening. So this is going to be an interesting game. I am just going to trade the bishop for the knight, which you might think that's a bit strange, but the reason why was just that knight was an important piece and trying to fight for the center. So I just decided to trade it and to castle here. And black doesn't always have an easy time developing the pieces, because like, where is this knight going to go? Where is that bishop going to go? It's not always as clear. So pawn takes d4. All right. And the thing I'm thinking about here is maybe some queen a4, maybe some knight b3. Those types of moves would be interesting. We mostly want to try to keep holding on to this very strong center if we can. Which my opponent is going to make that completely impossible here, but I guess that's okay. We cannot really do anything about it. I'm thinking if I have a funny tactic there. I think I have a funny tactic. I'm not sure. Let's see. We take. They take, and I'm looking at b4. b4 attacks the bishop, and if they take it, we give a check, and then we win the bishop. So that's a funny move, and it's also a good move, because if they don't take it, we could play our bishop to a better diagonal. So I think b4 is a funny move that we can play, and that helps us to get the bishop into the game as well. I hope, well, I actually hope they don't see it. I hope they just take it for free. That would be nice, but probably not going to happen anyways. So we cannot play, well, actually we can play bishop b2, because if they take it, they still blunder. So yeah, I can just play this. If they take it, they still blunder. This is so funny how we have this hanging b4 pawn that's basically poison, and they can never capture it. So that's interesting. Yeah, now they block the check, so that means this pawn is free. So we have to play this to protect it. But I think that was a very funny setup that we had there. Haven't played something like that in a long time. I'm looking for knight b3. I think knight b3 is an important move to play. We control this. We control this. So everything is looking great. And we can get a rook to the open file. c5 will also be a very good square for the knight in the future. Okay. That's an interesting move, pinning the knight, so I pretty much have to instantly unpin. So I guess... that's interesting. Because you would think that queen d3 is a good move, because you unpin the knight, but then they play bishop b5, and then we have a skewer, which is not great. So I guess I need to protect my knight first, and then move the queen. Yeah, this is a good move. And the knight is also useful there. These knights are very good pieces. Now I just have to move the queen. And then once the queen is moved, we are in a very good position. Plus, this knight is also helpful because knight f5 is a good move for black in those positions, and now we make that impossible. But you see, you always have to be careful for tactics, also for your opponent. I already realized a little bit earlier that this was a good square for the bishop and that I should always watch out for the skewer. If I hadn't realized that, I didn't say it, but I realized it while playing. If I hadn't been looking at this, I might have just played queen d3 and, yeah, gotten myself into some trouble there. But this is fine. Okay, it's not smart to keep a pin, so we will have to move the queen. Queen d3 is a very centralized square, protecting everything. Queen f3, I don't know, looks interesting, but probably doesn't do anything. This still sets up the skewer, so we have to be careful of that as well. Because if this knight ever moves, we are still skewered, so probably the safest option is queen to f3. Because otherwise we are just asking for tactics. We are asking to run into trouble. And this knight is completely out of the game. Now I'm looking at a move like rook c1 and something with knight c6. That's the plan. Knight a5, knight c6 could also be interesting. I think it's obvious that everything seems to be pointing that we need to try to infiltrate. I don't think c5 will ever be good because if they take, we just have a bad pawn structure. So I think knight a5, knight c6, that's the plan. And my opponent just left the game. We can claim victory in 60 seconds. Let's see if they return. If their computer crashed or if their internet connection failed, 60 seconds won't be enough. It's always so very exciting when they leave the game and then you see the clock ticking down, because if they don't come back, that's just some free rating that we didn't really have to fight for, but they are back. Okay. That's a trade. The question is, do we move the queen or do we move the knight? I feel like the knight is actually well placed. We have a well placed knight aiming at this. So I will be using the queen. And I don't think that trade was good for him because he gave us a bishop in exchange for a knight. That's usually not what you want to do. f4, I'm also looking at f4 potentially in the future if we ever need to reinforce the center. That doesn't do anything. My knight is already protected. Maybe he's looking at a5. I think that could be the case. I'm looking at maybe rook to c1, rook to c6. That's a plan. Playing h3 or f3 might also be interesting to take away some more squares from that knight. The thing is, if we take, we cannot get a new rook there because after take, we drop the knight. So maybe I also have to move the knight so we can remove that problem. So looking back at it, I don't know. Maybe knight takes also made sense. Knight f3. But then we give them knight f5. Huh. h3. I'll play h3. It just creates a square for the king, and we also take away a square from the knight. It's a good compromise in this position, this move. And what I'm looking at is maybe some variation where I can play something with rook takes and then bishop here, attacking the knight. I was also looking at just going queen g3, attacks the pawn. And if I can then get a bishop there and attack the knight, they are in some trouble. Because the knight looks like it's protected by a pawn, but my queen would be pinning that. So those are some ideas. I think queen g3. This exchange is also interesting, but we have to watch out because we always end up dropping the knight. Okay, so they play this, which it's smart because it gives them a square for the knight, but it also weakens the diagonal. Hmm. I think knight f3 still makes sense. Taking doesn't make sense. We help them. This makes sense, I think. This is an interesting position because I think in the end, black will always have quite a weak pawn structure. I mean, weak. I mean, yeah, they are connected, but it's like a floating pawn island, if you know what I mean. Like, we have two pawn islands, one on the right, one on the left. They have three, isolated, isolated, and then these are connected, which usually means that we can grind out this endgame. We can try. We can try to grind this endgame. But I'm not saying it's easy, but it should be winnable, or at least we should try to get an advantage. Ah, I'm looking at maybe queen e3, but that might isolate my own pawns. I don't like if I take, he gets a second rook there. Hmm. Maybe queen b2. Yeah, I think maybe I'll start with queen b2. It's interesting. This will be quite the endgame. I mean, we have equal pawns. Um, Equal amount of pawns, but our pawn structure is a little bit better. But they have that floating pawn island in the middle of the board. We have a 2 versus 1 on the queen side, which means we can create a passed pawn. So a lot of pawn tension going on. Definitely not an easy position. I'll trade and see if I can get a second trade. And their king is definitely weaker than our king, so that's good. I mean, as long as we keep queens on the board, that's going to be important. We keep the queens on the board because we might have some checks that can be very devastating. And I also think if we remove queens, that pawn will be too strong. So I want to see if I can keep the queens. And I'm looking at things like check, check, and then, like maybe the knight gets in there, something. Let's start with check. But I don't know if it actually leads to anything or if it's just an empty check. I have to really think here. This is not easy. This sacrifices a pawn for the attack. But there is a dovetail checkmate pattern that we could play there. Yeah. I think I will try this. Like, he might not see the dovetail checkmate, which is check, he goes up, check, he takes the knight, queen g4, and that's a checkmate. Because we are covering like like an arrow shape, and then those two pawns are blocking the final squares, and the king would be there. I hope that makes sense. That's the checkmate pattern that we have. So this move is basically threatening checkmate. Because we check, they only have one legal move. We check. If they go to the side of the board, that's also mate. So they have to take the knight, and then so it's basically threatening a 1, 2, a checkmate and 3 basically, which he might not see. Like if he takes that pawn, I think that's game over. Okay. I don't know how to feel about this move. I think it doesn't really change anything. I don't want to just exchange. I'm looking at this. This pins the knight to the queen and also threatens this check, which wins a piece. So he pretty much has to do something. He might play knight to c4. Then I have my check with the knight. He goes up with the king. I give a check. He has to take, and then we still have the dovetail checkmate. So I think this is completely winning. Yeah, I think this is completely winning because I think he missed the dovetail checkmate pattern. At least I think that's what it's called. And this is a nice threat. It's a pin, plus we threaten to check and win a piece. So it's just unstoppable checkmate in every variation, I think. And I'm pretty sure that he will play knight c4. I think that will be his move. It's the only move that really makes sense. Okay, he doesn't. He goes knight here, so maybe he saw the checkmate, but this blunders a queen. So I don't know how you can think for 2 minutes and then play the move that blunders the queen. That's just incredible. But I quickly wanted to show this position. So what I was looking at is knight here, knight f5, king g6, queen g8, king takes, queen checkmate. Well, I went a little bit too fast. Queen checkmate. And this is the checkmate pattern I was talking about with those two pawns. So it's basically forced checkmate. And if he goes there, we have queen e7, checkmate. If he goes to the corner square, that's back rank mate. And if he goes to the side square here, that's checkmate. So I think that move made sense, but it basically leads to unstoppable checkmate. And there is nothing else that you can do, I think. There is one move actually which is interesting, which looks like it saves everything for black, which is queen to c7, but this also loses the game. Queen takes d6, queen takes d6, knight fork, we pick up the queen, and we have an extra knight in the endgame, and we will be promoting. You can see that tactic in my tactic course as well.